Welcome to the University of Liverpool, the original red brick, the original planning school, and original research.
Hello and welcome to this Planning Research Institute video. I'm Richard Dunning and today I'm joined by Dr. Alex Nurse. Alex is an expert in subnational governance and recently he's been doing research on funding post-Brexit and the geography therein for the UK. So welcome Alex, and tell us, why did you do this research?
So the principal reason we did this research is we were interested in how the reality of post-Brexit funding stacked up with the rhetoric. So obviously in the midst of the referendum and afterwards we were told quite a lot about what a Brexit should look like, what it should feel like, where money should go to. And now that money has started to be allocated, we wanted to look at how that actually stacked up. So did it match with what we were told and what we would be led to expect?
Okay, so pre-Brexit we've got European Structural Investment Funds, post-Brexit we've got Prosperity Funds, Towns Funds, Levelling Up Fund. 3 funds are better than one, question mark, and how did that work out geographically?
So we found 2 core things in our paper. One is that the replacement funds, even though there were more funds, it was substantially less money than the European Structural Investment Funds would give to those places. The other thing that we found is that while there were kind of clear criteria for how that funding should be allocated, often the funding was not given to the places that you would expect to be given that funding. Places like Blackpool, coastal towns, places which predominantly would vote for Brexit, places that are predominantly deprived or economically challenged, they were not the places that would receive that funding. Quite often the funding was going to places that were objectively not deprived, and quite often they were aligning with the kind of political priorities, marginal seats, safe seats of kind of senior political party members for the Conservative Party. The reality of that funding allocation was that it wasn't going to where you would have expected it to go to.
Does that represent a difference in the structure of decision making about funding as well as that kind of allocation? So have we got different organisations making those decisions, and does that tell us anything about the role of funding in relation to the government structure?
Yeah, so pre-Brexit, the way that funding was allocated was based on economic need. So it was based on a proportion of GDP, and the goal was to bring you up to the EU average of that GDP, and that money was just allocated for regions to then spend on their own. There was no kind of political calculation in that. When it came down to the UK to do that, it inevitably became political. There was a political element. It was arranged and sorted in Whitehall, and then the argument we're making in the paper is that you can see that political influence affecting those decision making. Before it was apolitical, and now we're arguing that it is inherently political in nature.
So over the next 12 months, we're likely to have an election and a government, new or old, or a different permutation of the existing government. What are the lessons from your research for funding?
I think the core lessons that we would put forward are that this now needs a bit of a rethink. It's not going to the places that need it. And if levelling up, if it's going to continue, if there's going to be a new slogan, a new bit of rhetoric, it needs to focus on the places that are in the most objective need of that levelling up. Funding needs to be bigger, needs to be better, needs to be more ambitious, and it needs to go to the places that need it. If Brexit is going to be an ongoing project, if we're not going to go back into the EU, then that funding does need to be allocated in a way that does actually replicate the previous funding. Otherwise, you'll just see those deprivation gaps becoming wider, becoming deeper, and then the task will just become harder and harder and harder to remedy over time.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for your work on this. Helpful to point out and make this point about the diversity of economic geographies within the UK that are receiving funding post-Brexit. If you want to read more about Alex's work with Olivier Sykes, you can read about it in the Journal of Advances in Economic Geography. There's a link below, or you can have a look at Alex's webpage, which has also got those details. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching.